With that, I want to call the meeting to order. 7:06 by my computer. Attendance tonight, we have all members present except for Joanne and Michelle at this point, who we expect to log on shortly. And in person, we have Mr. Mann and Ms. Curtin, while their board members are here virtually. So with that, if you could please rise and join me in the pledge. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I already mentioned earlier, we have our student council present, Ryan and Katie. How are you? So what do you got for us tonight?
We just have a few quick updates. So this week at the high school, it's been our Spirit Week. So Monday and Tuesday were Pajama Day, which was very exciting. And today, everyone's been wearing their class shirts for our virtual Wednesday. And each day, students have been sending in pictures to our Columbia Instagram. And at the end of the week, we're going to have a drawing, and all of the entries are going to be entered for a raffle prize that's going to be provided by the PTSO. And then we'd also just like to mention that on behalf of all the high school students, that being back in person, especially these past couple weeks, has really helped us both mental health wise and has really boosted morale throughout the whole school. So we're really grateful for that. And with Spirit Week being such a success this week, we're so excited to plan more things for the rest of the school year.
Great. Thanks, Katie. And Ryan?
Thank you. We have launched our apparel website, and it will be open until November 30th, and we are selling sweatpants, crew necks, sweatshirts, and more. And after Thanksgiving break, we're going to start planning winter activities. However, we don't yet know how that will look like and what we will be able to do, but we will keep you apprised.
Sounds good. Can you guys hear me? I think I froze.
We can hear you.
Can you hear us now, Mr. Buno?
How about now?
Very good. Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm switching back and forth here with the board docs. Okay, so now we'll move to the public forum. So thanks, Katie and Ryan. Sorry about the technical difficulties. As always, we'll be doing in the virtual world, we've been doing the emails. So if you have any comments for the public forum, please include them in the email. Residents, students, employees, and business representatives of the Greenbush Central School District may address the board on matters concerning programs and our operation of the district other than matters involving personnel. Members of the board do not directly respond to citizen concerns in the public forum. If a response is appropriate, either the president or superintendent will contact the individual in the near future. Those persons wishing to address the board will be recognized by the chair of the meeting and should state for the record their name and address or affiliation with the district or business. So that would be in your email. We'd appreciate if you would identify yourself. While the board does not wish to infringe upon free speech protection, it must be stressed the visitors forum is not deemed to be an open forum. The board president will conduct the forum for the orderly and efficient operation of board business. So Linda, are you monitoring the?
I am, Mr. Buno, but there are no public comments at this time.
Very good. Okay. I'm just going to shift myself to a different screen here. All right. Moving on, we have then the board forum. In my grid view, I can start with Michelle. Anything? How about Frank?
No.
Good. Mr. Dunn? Good. Deanna? Good. Joanne? A lot of thumbs up. Still in the virtual world, we have Jennifer. Anything? And Kathleen and Mark.
Nothing for either of us.
Okay. All right, the next part would be, Mr. Simons, do you have anything? I don't have anything.
No, I'm going to save any comments I make till we talk about the K-5 in person, and we'll talk about the reopening plan at that time.
Okay, so now we'll move to our discussion items of the 2020-2021 board goals. As you know, we're into November already, but we want to have a conversation really about where would we go for the rest of the school year, and maybe Mr. Simons, you can kind of tee this up for us.
So I'm going to ask Mr. Goodwin to share the screen and show the draft scorecard for just a minute so that members of the public and the administrative team and board members participating remotely can see it. This looks a little different than the last scorecard document, which was shared and reviewed by the board at the last board meeting. We are entering into a little bit of a late start with this process, but this process of reviewing the board's goals and some of the primary objectives of the district and the board has been established and been occurring for the last 4 years. This will be the 5th year. And we usually start with a general conversation with the board, discussing their goals. Do they want to make any changes or revisions to the goals? And is there anything within those goals or other areas of the district's operations that you would like to see addressed during this current school year? We would then take that information back to our administrative team and refine some objectives and strategies and measures that we would bring back to you for your review, ultimately with the board adopting the scorecard goals and objectives for the year. So we just kind of wanted to open up the conversation tonight. We anticipate that there'll be perhaps more time at the next meeting to continue the discussion. But just in general, would the board like to see any changes or any additions to the goals as written currently?
Anybody have any comments? I think for me, just to, I guess to kick it off, it's kind of challenging in this environment, but the concerns I have is really and board goal number 1 is how do we just look at the gaps in academic, in the learning that may have occurred since we've been remote.
So to support what Mr. Buno is saying, one of the things that districts are being asked to take a look at this year, and really going back to last spring, is how can we identify some of the impact on academic progress that COVID-19 adjustments have had on our students at all levels, and then talking about what we might be able to do to address some of those learning gaps. I would support that as an important priority within the district. And I know that Mr. McHugh, the principals, and some of the staff have already identified through some of the screening that we do, as well as the first quarter marking period grades, that there are some issues out there that we're going to have to address and adjust to in response to student needs. So I would support Mr. Buno's recommendation that be a priority area of the district under goal number 1.
Anyone else? Comments, board members?
Yeah, I do, Mike.
Yep.
Under 1, achieve academic excellence through reflection, innovation, accountability. I'd like to put in there the word review. You know, we talked about last year about reviewing some programs to see if they were something that we wanted to continue with. So I would like to see that added to our goal to get the review in of some of those classes that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please just speak up a
Mark,
bit?
yeah, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
A little better.
It's right up next to my mouth, so I can't go anymore. So my goal for board goal 1, I want to put the word review in there to start reviewing and possibly phasing out some of those programs that we talked about and replacing them with something more viable. So if we put in that board goal review, then we could look at some of those programs, and we listed them out at the retreat last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to see those looked at and incorporated into this year's board goals.
Very good.
Sounds good.
I do recall we had a discussion of certain classes and certain programs, and we did some preliminary work, but we didn't do a full study, and we definitely are prepared to do that. And we've been talking with some of the other suburban council districts about the courses they offer in their program of study. So I think that's a good thing that we could pick up on and do this year.
Okay,
And I would
thank you.
support that. Yep.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mike.
Okay.
Mike, I have a comment.
Yep.
I agree with your position in regards to goal number 1. And Jeff, in some way, shape, or form, in the scorecard, if we could make a reflection of COVID and the different strategies that we've had to develop and try to track how we've improved as this progress goes through, as we get better at the virtual learning. I would like to see some measure as to where we started with this pandemic and then where we ended up, so that we can kind of track it, so that for next academic season, we will be prepared to address any potential shortcomings.
So you'd like to see really an evaluation and a progress report of what we have improved in terms of our remote learning program, our virtual instruction, and what we've learned from it, and how we're going to implement some of those improvements now and in the future.
Yeah, I think that would be a good, it ties into, if we make a reference to this situation, because there's going to be a shift in our data. There's no doubt, based on what we've gone through. So I think if we recognize that shift, we identify the cause of the shift, and then we track it, we can use the data that we collect from this year's goals to really be creative for next year. I think it'll help us in our planning.
Thank you, John.
Anyone else? Board members? I think if I were to add some more comments, we want to continue on the path. We talked about some of the HR processes and things like that. Continue on that path of, where we were this past year. Just continue to shape that and broaden that, as well as I have some other notes. Let's see. Lost my notes here. But I think that was a big one for me. And then continue to build those relationships with our families as we had during the COVID. We've learned a lot from engagement and the challenges that presents, and how we can continue to communicate and be close with our families and make sure that we're meeting their needs.
Excellent.
Okay. Yep. All right.
Jeff, in that area also, board goal 3, I'd like to showcase the Food for Families program and the backpack programs, because there's tons of work being done by those groups, and I just want to make sure that's included in the goals.
Yeah, there's a lot of work being done by, honestly, you, Joanne, your husband, Steve, Mike Leonard, Audra DeBacco, and many, many others in the community to provide for that need. So I do think it needs to be captured.
Right. The transportation department has been working weekly with us. There's a lot of effort going on by the staff.
Thank you, Joanne.
You're welcome.
Thanks for what you're doing, and Steve, to help with that program. I appreciate it very much.
what we're doing is little compared to what everyone else in the school is. The school working together, the guidance counselors, the social workers, they're doing a remarkable job in reaching these families.
Thank you.
I think just one more comment from me. I found my notes. Just under board goal number 4, continue to work towards, a safe environment culturally, the diversity. You know, a lot of challenging things coming down the road. I think as we've seen, kind of nationwide and throughout the state. Just continue on that, looking at the school climate, doing our surveys, and making that one of our priorities.
Thank you.
That gave you some a starting point.
I think it's a good starting point.
Okay.
We'll bring this back to our team, and we'll try to write some things up, and we'll provide it at the next meeting in December for you to
Okay.
take a look at as a draft. I appreciate everybody's input.
And Jeff, I just wanted to say that, given the year we're experiencing, I don't think we need a lot of significant goals. We have to really narrow in on the ones that we really want to focus on, because you guys have so much on your plate that it just seems unfair to give you 50 goals. It's not realistic for the year that we're living in.
We appreciate that, and I can feel my blood pressure going down right now. So I really appreciate that comment, Michelle. We'll bring that back to our team, and we'll try to narrow it and have them be focused on the areas that you just identified in this discussion.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, I agree with Michelle. Keep it tight, and know that your number one priority right now is keeping our kids safe, keeping the learning going, working with our staff, and these other areas. We'll probably think things that we'll address, but also see carried over into the next year as well.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
We'll go back to we'll be able to see everybody, Peter.
Very good. Okay. So now we'll move to the second discussion item on the update on the kindergarten in-person learning. Mr. Simons?
Yes, I'd like to start with current events of the week, which are directly related to the district's decision-making regarding whether or not we can make changes to our current hybrid instructional model.
Mm-hmm.
As the public is likely aware, the number of COVID positive cases is going up in the state, it's going up in our region, and it's going up across the country. And just since the end of October, we have reported 4 student cases and 1 employee case today. And we've been fortunate that the timing of those individuals becoming symptomatic in the district has been such that we weren't required to shift to full remote, although we're prepared to do that. In the case of the student today that was reported positive, the individual became symptomatic within a time period in which they had been in the school within 48 hours. And so that metric triggers a significant amount of contact tracing required by the district in coordination with the county. So we made an announcement late this afternoon that the high school would be operating under a virtual live instruction model tomorrow, so that the contact tracing that started this afternoon with the administrators and some of the staff, including busing, could occur accurately. That is going on right now. At this point, we have potential for 35 to 40, maybe even more students who may be quarantined as a result of 1 case. We do have rosters and seating charts and other information available to us to be able to provide to the county, and Mr. Harkin and his team at the high school have been doing that since this afternoon. We hope that process would be completed tomorrow, and then we would open under our normal B-Day schedule for Friday. There is a possibility that we might need to do further work on that in the event that we do. We want to make sure that everything we do is accurate and all the families are informed that their students may need to be quarantined that may enter into Friday. If that does, we will have a virtual live day on Friday as well. And all the communication with the families and the staff is occurring right now. I bring that up because we are also studying options to address the concerns of our elementary parents, which we are aware of and sensitive to, regarding their request to consider in-person days being increased from the current 2 to 5 at the kindergarten through 5th grade level. At the last board meeting, we reported that we had done the review of the number of children and families who wanted their students to return to school for in-person learning from the full remote program. Those students are now returned to our classrooms, and we have to account for the space we need to have social distancing in place in every classroom, with the desks remaining 6 feet apart. After doing that review, we determined that we do not have sufficient space to implement increased days of in-person learning in 1st grade through 5th grade, but we also determined that we could accommodate an increase to 5 days a week for in-person learning at the kindergarten level if we added 2 additional classroom sections in person, one at Belltop and one at Janay. And we started conversations with our teachers at the kindergarten level, with our principals, as well as our Teachers Association, about how we could go about doing that. And we are still having those conversations. We are able to do this from a space standpoint. We are tentatively preparing to be able to do a shift in the kindergarten program. Unfortunately, with the planning that's been occurring in the district, this is occurring at a time when the COVID-19 cases are increasing for districts, and many districts and schools are shifting to full remote. We read about cases, for example, in our neighboring district of Averill Park, with more than 200 children who had to quarantine. And we are challenged by the social nature of our high school kids. And now we have our college kids coming home for Thanksgiving. We have all read about the concerns regarding gatherings, and we all have different views on that. But nonetheless, the more contact that families and or students have outside of school increases the probability that those students could come into contact with someone who has the COVID-19 infection and could come into our schools. And one thing I want to emphasize, we've talked about this among all of the superintendents in the Questar BOCES and with the County Department of Health over the last few weeks, the schools are not the source of spread for COVID-19. In fact, because of the rules we have to follow, we have had no cases where we could identify through contact tracing or any other information that a staff member or a student contracted COVID-19 in the school environment. It's the outside activities that are increasing the contacts, which in each case that we've had, we've done the contact tracing and we've determined it was an outside either social activity or a family contact that occurred. For example, a parent who contracted COVID-19 through their work responsibilities, and then it was in the family. So we feel that given the number of kindergarten kids that would be in our classrooms 5 days a week, if we went to in-person, we feel that we could do that right now based on the COVID data in the region safely. But things could change. Things can change in a hurry, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks. There was a Times Union article today that accounted a significant increase in the percentage of cases in schools just in a 2-week time period. And we're entering into the holidays. So we're cautiously approaching this. And what we would like to do to address the concerns is to continue to work on a plan which does involve rescheduling classes, rescheduling some teachers, both in person and remote, involves some shifts of students on class lists in order to be able to accommodate the class sizes that we need to maintain. The kindergarten sections would generally be between 14 and 16 students maximum. I'll ask Mr. McHugh to check that. But we want to wait and see what happens over the course of the Thanksgiving recess. We would like to have, if we can do this safely, we'd like the implementation date to be around December 14th. We'll have to make a decision by December 7th. We say December 14th because initially we were talking about a November 30th date, and then the cases started to go up. December 14th gives us the 14-day period that the CDC and the New York State Department and the County Health Department looks at, that it generally would take a period of 14 days to know whether or not an individual came into contact with somebody and contracts COVID-19. It is typically around the 5th or the 7th day, according to the County Health Department, where symptoms would begin to show up. So that December 7th, to make a decision on whether or not we can move forward with an increase in kindergarten in-person learning seems to make sense for us. But we want everyone to know that this is a fluid situation. We want to be able to respond to the needs of our kindergarten kids and our elementary families. We're just being asked to make this decision at a time when the COVID-19 situation is increasing, and the state is talking about, and school districts are talking about, a cluster model, micro-cluster model, that would involve schools having to be classified in a yellow zone, an orange zone, or a red zone. And we're talking within the Questar BOCES about the fact that if we are identified as a school district in the yellow zone, how we could implement a testing program for students and staff to remain open. We would be required to test 20% of our students and 20% of our staff on a voluntary basis, on a rotating basis with different groups of students and staff being tested. We're talking about the logistics of how we might do that with a regional approach through Questar BOCES, because we feel strongly as an administrative team that we should take every step possible to continue to offer in-person learning for all of our kids, elementary to high school, if it's feasible. So we want to wait and see what happens after the Thanksgiving recess. We'll continue to keep the board and the community informed. We can't announce a date right now that we would implement this because the situation continues to change every day. And we just want to wait and see what happens. But we do have a plan that would bring kindergarten back. Whether or not we can execute that plan safely is something that we're going to have to continue to monitor regarding the cases within our own district, as well as the cases within our neighboring communities, because our kids also interact with one another and our families interact with one another. And that is something that just happens, and we have to monitor the circumstances. So if anybody has any questions or concerns about the K-5 program as we're currently operating it, or as we're trying to increase in-person learning, we'll take any questions or concerns that board members might have, or later on in the public comment, if there are public questions about it, we'd be happy to respond to it.
Thanks, Jeff. I mean, we just heard New York City schools, right, about them. I think if we had this conversation a few weeks ago, we probably would have been on a different path in terms of the date to be able to do something like this. But I think we have to be very cautious right now. And I think that is the direction I support, to continually make sure it's done safely and make sure that the district can still provide, like you said, at least some in-person learning and try to avoid to go remote as much as possible. And I think the other impact we're going to have too is the fact that many of our surrounding districts, when they go remote, that impacts our staff and their ability to, if they have children in those school districts, being able to get to work and having to be remote, things like that. So there's a lot of different challenges besides just within the district.
Mr. Buono, I appreciate your comments about the staff being impacted. For example, we've had, I think, 3 teachers impacted by their children's school district going remote, and we've had to shift those teachers to enable them to teach remotely. We have concerns about transportation and busing employees. We have had and talked about a shortage of bus drivers for some time now, for many years now. We are at a pretty concerning threshold regarding the impact of quarantines, for example, on our employees within the bus department. Not that we have cases in the bus department, but we have individuals who may be associated or in contact with a case who are quarantined and need to stay home and can't report to work. So these things may not be generally understood by the public, but our ability to staff our schools and our ability to staff our busing is an important factor that would play into our decision to be able to continue to offer in-person learning within our hybrid model.
Yep. And I know that with the testing too, the ability to get an appointment and then the delays in the results also impacts the ability for staff to return to work based on the toolkit and the things we have to follow to make sure that people come back to work safely as well. So any other comments, board members, in terms of the plan and the, no? Okay. Questions?
So sorry, Jeff, I just have a more general question. When does, and I don't know if you know this answer, but when does it come to a point that we have so many that we have to sadly talk about going virtual? I don't know if you want to talk about that here or not, but where are we? Obviously, we might have 35 or so. Where does the Department of Health come in and say, or is it them, or is it state ed, or is it us that say, okay, we got to go virtual for a little while?
I think it's a combination of all 3. The state measures that would force our district into a yellow zone. I don't have those numbers available, but it's in the neighborhood of 3.5% infection rate. And then there's a measure of the increase on the daily number of cases. There's 2 separate measures. So that metric would trigger the state to say your school is located in a yellow zone and therefore you have to implement a testing program if you want to reopen. So we would immediately have to go to virtual remote learning in that particular school that's in the zone. It might not be the entire district. It could be just a school or 2 within a particular zone, depending on the state's determination as to what zip codes are affected by that classification. Once we implemented the testing program and the infection rate was below the rate of the region or the cluster, we would have permission to open as long as we get the assurances of the county and the state that our program for reopening is safe and within their guidelines. So that's one set of considerations that could cause us to go for remote, would be the state identifying our schools within a yellow zone, orange zone, or red zone. The second would be in the event that we have so many cases among students and potentially staff that the contact tracing requirements would require us to close the school, operate remotely, and could extend over a period of time. So you've seen some districts locally shift from, we're going to go to virtual learning for a day. Then it became, we're going to go to virtual learning until the weekend. We're still working on contact tracing. And then it went to, we're going to remain in remote learning until November 30th or after Thanksgiving, because the cases continued to come in every day. And it became a management issue to track the students, track the contacts, and assess the number of quarantined employees, and it hampered the district's ability to operate in person. The third set, we could make a local decision that we are going to shift to full remote because the challenges of COVID-19 are to the point where operating our schools safely is so burdensome that we can't do it. We're not at that point. I hope we don't get to that point. I will say that I know that within our administrative team and among the superintendents in Rensselaer County, we want to make every effort possible to offer in-person learning to the kids as long as we can. But it could come to a point where, metrics aside, the capacity of the district to be able to staff classrooms, to be able to run buses, to be able to have meals would become so difficult that we would have to shift to full remote. The other factor affecting some districts, I don't believe it would affect us, is if the governor does have to implement a 20% reduction in state aid. Some districts anticipated that and already went to full remote because they saved money. That savings only occurs if you reduce some of the employees that generally would provide services if you were offering the program in person. We hope not to get there. We hope that we are able to maintain all of our employees and staff to deliver a hybrid model currently, and to get through this in a way that we move through the holidays and we're still offering at least 2 days of in-person instruction to the kids. It's a daily assessment, to be quite honest about it, and we're all talking about it. Marissa, if you can just give some data points about staffing and some of the challenges regarding staffing staff that's on quarantine.
I think, Mr. Simons, you've hit on two good points. One being we can't control who's quarantined. And the quarantines are for 14 days, which has a huge impact on our transportation garage, on our teachers, on our support staff. And when we have 3 employees out for 14 days each, all at the same time, we're not necessarily able to provide the same types of services in our bus garage if we have more than that out. So we have to assess every day to make sure we do have enough staff within our transportation department. We have to assess every day also our substitute teachers, and to make sure if we are allowing our teachers to go work remotely from home to care for their to be home for their children while their schools are shut down, we still have to have a substitute as the adult coverage in the classroom supervising the students. So I'm in constant communication with our principals daily to make sure, can we approve of the remote? Does it make sense? But also, do we have a substitute that we could put into that classroom to make sure the Promethean boards are on, so the streaming services are occurring, and we monitor daily. So we will continue to do that. And I will continue to provide updates to our principals, to our transportation supervisor, and to our core administration team if we come to a point where we're not able to accommodate someone's request, or if we come to a point where we have too many people who are on quarantine. Right now, though, it is manageable.
One thing, thank you, Marissa. One thing that we have done and we've made a decision on regarding in-person learning is we've made an adjustment to the middle school alternative program. So our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, our 7th and 8th graders who are in the MAP program are attending 4 days a week. We made that adjustment because the staff felt that students needed more in-person support, that their academic and social emotional progress required it. And based on staff and the recommendation of Mrs. Barker, we moved in that direction already. We also have plans on November 30th to bring the students who are receiving consultant teacher services, co-teaching services in the elementary level, at the K-5 level, in for instruction 4 days a week. That is due to the federal requirements being interpreted differently than they were last spring by the federal government. The state has been told that students who are receiving those services, that districts have to provide those services in accordance with the IEP. And if the IEP requires a certain number of minutes per day of instruction in those services, the kids need to be in person to do that. So Mrs. McGrath has made adjustments and has worked with her staff to accomplish that on November 30th. I share those two things because we are trying to increase in-person learning for our most vulnerable kids, or our kids who need more support. We recognize that that may not fully address all of the children and families who have concerns about this, but we are trying. And we hope to be able to make an adjustment to kindergarten. We just don't know if that will happen. That was a long-winded answer, and I apologize, but that's everything that's going on related to the district's assessment of trying to modify its program to respond to parent and student concerns.
No, we appreciate the detail, Mr. Simons. I think it's important that we continue to push that information out, because as we learn more and have to deal with the challenges, we just need to communicate with our families and our school community that kind of the direction we're going in and the various factors that are impacting that. So it's important that we spend the time on that, and so folks can hear it.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question about the staffing, Marissa? We're hearing that some of our other local communities need to go remote. Is there any way we can talk to them that while they're on remote, maybe we can borrow a couple bus drivers, or maybe kind of pool the subgroups? Because if they're on remote, they probably don't need the substitute teachers or the substitute bus drivers, but we're still going. So is there any way we can work with the other superintendents and talk about some of this?
I think that's a great idea, and we will certainly look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you. I have also thought about, and I haven't done anything about this in recent days, whether or not organizations such as UAlbany that have a bus service have availability, and whether or not we could make some arrangement with them or potentially CDTA.
Perfect.
For drivers.
Very good. Any more questions, board members? Nope. Okay. Let's move to committee reports. We'll start with Marissa.
We have met 3 times now as an Appendix D committee. Our first meeting was on October 19th, our second meeting on October 29th, and our third meeting on November 9th. Our committee has been tasked with 3 objectives. The first being developing an annual application, developing an evaluation tool, and then lastly, developing a new matrix for determining the level of compensation to be provided to the co-curricular activity and realigning the current compensation schedule with that new matrix. These objectives need to be finished by January 1st of 2021. So we are working hard and diligently to meet this deadline. Our committee has very closely looked at an application, and we believe at this point we have a final application ready. A couple of items on that application that I want to discuss would be having the advisor indicate how many hours that they plan to meet with the members and how many meetings per month they'll hold. Also addressing the maximum number of participants, so our administrators know exactly what to look for when observing. So based on the application, we have a good indication of how many hours it's going to run for, how many times per month, what is the number of participants, and then also they will need to provide the interview committee with a letter of intent about how they will promote the clubs, how will they go about fundraising, if fundraising is applicable, and what really the purpose that club serves for our students. So we really want to make sure that the offerings that we're providing are relevant, and we also have accountability for our advisors. We've looked very closely at an evaluation tool. We started with looking at the evaluation tool for our coaches in Appendix C and looking to see what works well with that evaluation and borrowing some of those ideas for the Appendix D evaluation. So currently we have 3 categories that we're looking to evaluate on. The first is organization and management, the second being engagement and participation, and then the third being fiscal management. So our committee right now is still making improvements to the draft evaluation tool, but we are moving forward, and I do believe we will have both the completed application and evaluation tool by the end of our next meeting, which is actually tomorrow. We ended our meeting on November 9th with really talking about the new cost matrix and what are some of the criteria that we need to be basing that off of. Some of the criteria that we briefly discussed is a time commitment. That is big, and we want to make sure that our advisors are compensated fairly for the time that they are putting into the clubs. And another component we discussed was complexity. So we've left off that meeting, and we are all going to be bringing to tomorrow's meeting all of our own thoughts about what needs to be included in that matrix, and then combining our ideas and coming up with a solution to providing a fair salary stipends for 2021. And again, that is due by January 1st, 2021. So I think we are moving forward in the right direction right now. And we've been working very, very well as a team. So I'm appreciative of that.
Thanks, Marissa. Any questions for Marissa? No? I just want to say that I appreciate the hard work of the committee. I think this is the direction that we had hoped as far as the board and with the Appendix D, and we appreciate the work that the folks are doing in that. So we'll move on to next committee. Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. The Finance and Audit Committee met on Thursday, November 5th, to review the financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2020. Alan Walther, shareholder with the Bonadio Group, was present. He reviewed the financial statements with the committee and answered any of their questions. I'm not going to get into the details of the financial statements right now, as we will be presenting them a little bit later this evening. Michael Wolf, our internal auditor, also joined us that evening. He gave us an update on his internal audits for 1920. He is approximately 90% complete with the audits of risk assessment, cash, and payroll. He has completed the audit for the Education Foundation for the 18-19 school year, and he will be meeting up with the treasurer of the Education Foundation to collect the records for the 19-20 year in December. And he will also be setting up dates with us in the office for December to complete his audits. And then finally, the year ending June 30th, 2020 was the 5th year of a 5-year agreement for independent audit services with the Bonadio Group. So in January, we will be issuing an RFP for independent audit services for the next 5-year cycle, and the committee will get together on that and make a recommendation to the board at a later date. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. And we'll have that other information, the audit report later in the meeting,
Yes, we
correct?
will. Yes.
All right. Seeing no questions for Linda, we'll move to Jim McHugh.
Hi, our Education Committee met on November 2nd. During that committee, there was a brief presentation of the K-5 Curriculum Corner. And that K-5 Curriculum Corner was created by our 6 elementary grade level content coordinators. And really the value in that is that that site houses all of our most current curriculum work, our curriculum maps, our units of instruction, our common assessments, and our instructional resources. But the value in that, when you think about annually each summer, faculty engages in curriculum writing and curriculum work, we've moved from that work being placed in a hard binder and stored on shelves, and wondering how new staff and new employees get that information and are able to access that information. So that website is a link that's right on our district homepage for our teachers, and it's really a way of archiving all of our curriculum work and allowing easy access for all faculty members to be able to access all of that information in those documents. We also reviewed and had a discussion of our most recent ACE Greenbush Central School District data, our ESSA reports. That'll be discussed a little bit more deeply later on this evening. And then we, during Good for the Order, we discussed the course failures for Q1. The course failures for Q1 are quite high. They're higher than we've seen them over the last couple of years. And, you know, we talked about the difficulty of students adjusting to the hybrid model. So we know the value of students being in person. Those are the days that students are engaging in their work. But when they are on those remote days and the live virtual days, we are challenged with keeping students engaged and active during that time. So we've increased the accountability for faculty, and we made it clear that we were implementing our East Greenbush Central School District grading policy, but that increase of accountability works both ways. Our students have it as well. And our students need to make sure that they're engaging and participating in their classes as they're expected to do. So we can talk about that a little later, but you know, we've done some work to do some suburban council comparisons, but it is kind of as expected. When last spring, you know, we switched to pass-fail, and during that time, none of that work could be used to hurt a student, only help a student, and it's a little bit of an adjustment period right now. So we are looking at that data. Our our Committee for Curriculum Study met on November 4th. We had an update where our current program reviews are English Language Arts, Science, and Special Education and Related Services. It was the due date for new course proposals. There were new course proposals that were presented. And then we started to talk about new textbook requests. Our Envision Math K-5 and our Envision Math 6 through 8 is in its final year of a third-year agreement that expires June 30th, 2021. We are looking at a new 3-year renewal. Pearson has switched to Savvis Learning, so we are dealing with them currently. And we would like to stay with that current math program at least through our next program review. There was a new textbook request for analysis of public policy. That is our participation in government class that we are working with Syracuse University to offer college credit. When you do offer college credit for these courses, you're really required to use the textbook that the colleges use. So there's a textbook that accompanies that. All of these things were in our plan, and they were on our radar well over a year ago. And there was a middle school foreign language textbook proposal that we are reviewing. They put forth a 5-year proposal, which we were not comfortable with. We want to see a shorter proposal, but it's for Spanish and French. And then the last item was there was a lively discussion regarding offering accounting as a third unit of math credit. That discussion and the information and things that were discussed are included in the minutes, but we could not come to consensus at that point, so we kicked it back to Columbia High School for an item for academic council to review and to be brought back to CCS at a later time.
Any questions for Jim?
Jim, you said a Spanish and French proposal for 5 years. What 5 years for what? Like
It's digital access to a digital curriculum for Goff Middle School. In replacement of a textbook, it's a digital resource for our 6th, 7, and 8, actually grade 7 and grade 8.
is that in lieu of textbooks or?
Yes, yep. And, just a 5-year proposal for that agreement was $10,000, $10,842. So CCS, we talked about it. The comfort level for any kind of 5-year agreement is just not there. Things change, the standards change. So the department chair is working to revamp that proposal and bring forth a 1-year proposal, a 2-year proposal, a 3-year proposal, and we'll make that decision at that time. We'll endorse something through CCS that before any purchase is made, it comes back to the board for board approval.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Jim, I just wanted the course failure is a little concerning there. I think just that's something that we have to just continue to monitor, like you said, and make sure that keep the board informed about steps we're taking to help students and make this adjustment. Like I said, it's not unexpected, but it also is concerning that it'd be interesting to see kind of where these things are happening, the student demographics perhaps, and what are some of the reasons as you get that data.
We have that data. We just didn't have it in time to put it on this
Okay.
agenda.
No
Mr.
problem.
McHugh and I have been discussing it, and I know he's been working with the principals.
Okay.
So we would anticipate we'd be able to bring back a more detailed report on first quarter failures at the next board meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then moving, Jeff, anything on the advocacy committee?
Yes, we held our first advocacy committee meeting, and we were pleased that 4 new students joined us from the high school, and we had a good opportunity to talk about some of the statewide issues that we focused on last year regarding state aid. We talked about the current situation with our state aid being frozen at last year's level and the potential for 20% reduction. We have a transportation aid concern now that transportation services were operating last spring to deliver food as well as to meet other mandates. And yet the state has determined that those services, including I think $1 million worth of salaries during that period, are not eligible for transportation aid. We're going to get you the impact of that on our aid if it were to go through. Mrs. Curtin has requested that, and I think it's a good idea to talk about it. But we talked about state funding. We also incorporated some of the kids' ideas regarding what they felt the impact of COVID-19 was. They all indicated that they understood that districts would save money if they went full remote, but they felt it would have an impact on their educational experience. We want to tap into the students' skills with social media, TikTok, and other things that I don't know what they are. I just know they're there, to see if they can't come up with some virtual platforms for advocacy. And we promised the committee that we would bring back some discussions that have occurred within our regional group, advocacy group through Questar, as well as this past week I was able on Monday to participate in the NISCUS statewide conversation. So advocacy committee is up and running. We plan to try to put something together this year, maybe a virtual lobbying forum. We were asked to see if we might join with other districts. So I did reach out to Superintendent Lori Kaplan at Waterville, who is the co-chair of the CAP region advocacy group, and we're going to have a conversation together about how we might all join forces with our advocacy committee and the groups that are part of other districts in the area to see what we can't do to make sure that we either get federal funding to offset the state loss, we adjust some mandates so that we can save on some of our expenses, but we're heading into a very dangerous and concerning fiscal forecast for school districts right now, given rising expenses for COVID-19 and reopening and a looming potential for state aid loss of 20%. So it was a good conversation. Really nice kids have joined us. We had a parent from Janae. Yeah, actually, she's a golf parent now, and we're joined by some of our principals and our representatives of our bargaining units, and it was a good conversation. And we look forward to further meetings.
Great, important topics, and I'm glad the students and parents were able to join. I just, like you said, the connection continue with in-person learning. We heard it from Katie and Ryan, how important that is to our high schoolers as well. And I think, as long as, again, just kind of reiterate, the longer we can continue to have a hybrid model that serves our students and families where they can at least have some in-person learning, I think the better off we're to be in the long term. So appreciate the work there on the advocacy committee. Moving forward, we have our draft minutes for the October 21st meeting. Any questions, comments, or revisions? So this is a little challenging for me. I can't see Mark or Kathleen. So if there's a motion to be made or a second or a vote, I need some verbal acknowledgement from our live participants, if that's okay.
Peter, maybe we can go back to the view.
We can.
Okay. Mr. Buono, Peter's trying to go back to take the agenda off and go back to the view of the board members so you can get the tally of the vote. There you are.
Yep, I can see Mr. Simons pretty well. So if there's no any corrections or revisions, hearing none, I need a motion to approve the minutes for October 21st. Jennifer, second. Joanne, all those in favor? Yes?
Aye.
Aye.
Good. Okay, thank you. Moving on to regular business. Approval of programs for resident children with disabilities. Any questions or comments? If not, I need a motion to approve that. John, second. Frank, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Approved. So the next part of regular business is a change.org petition that came to the district from a community member. Can you speak to this a little bit, Mr. Simons?
Yes, the board received a petition from on behalf of parents and others from a resident who happens to be a parent, April Miracle. The petition requests that the district offer in-person learning to all kindergarten and fifth grade students. Based on advice of counsel, the board should accept the petition into the record at an official board meeting, which the resolution attached would enable you to do, as well as there's a copy of the petition. By accepting the petition, the board is not obligated nor indicating any commitment to respond in any way to the petition. For example, by approving this resolution, you're not agreeing to implement what the petitioner is requesting. You're simply accepting it into the record.
Okay.
Formally, so that it can be reflected into the minutes.
Very good. Any questions regarding the petition? And I know that this is an issue that we have been discussing for several meetings. We understand and appreciate the concerns, the outreach that parents have. So I want to thank them for reaching out and continue to reach out. And I would just encourage the parents to work with their teachers, work with their principals in their buildings. If you feel that there's some gaps in your students' remote experience and hybrid experience, so we can address those. And as a district, Mr. Simons said earlier quite well, the concerns we have right now and how we're going to address things moving forward. So I hope that working together, we can find a solution that best fits for the school community. So just as Mr. Simons said, I'll read the resolution. The Board of Ed of East Greenbush Central School District hereby acknowledges receipt of petition submitted by April Markel. Hope I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not. So if not, I need a motion to accept the petition and the resolution. Jennifer, in a second. Can't see anybody. Anybody else? Michelle, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Good. We acknowledge it and thank them, and we continue to work on this issue as a school community. We're now moving to reports and presentations. I think, Linda, you're back on with the audit report and financial statements for 1920.
Thank you, Mr. Buono. Okay, in your packet, there are 3 items in your packet. They are the required communications letter, the financial statements and required reports under uniform guidance, and the extra classroom activity funds. The first, the required communications letter, that is a standard letter from the auditors to the board to make you aware of such items such as significant audit findings and their consideration of accounting estimates in the financial statements, as well as financial statement disclosures. They also document if there are any difficulties that they encountered in performing the audit, of which I'm happy to say there were none. They document if there were any corrected or uncorrected misstatements, of which there were none, and any disagreements with management, of which there were none. They also talk about management's representation to the auditors, and if the district has consulted with any other independent accountant, which we have not. That's a standard letter. The thick report in your packets is the financial statements and required reports under the uniform guidance. The auditor's opinion is an unmodified opinion indicating that the financial statements present fairly the financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information for the district as of June 30th, 2020. This is an unmodified opinion, and it is the auditor's highest level of assurance. After the opinion in the financial statements is the management discussion and analysis. That goes from pages 4 through 13. It's designed to provide an overview of the financial operations and changes from prior year in an easy-to-read format. One item I would like to note is that on page 8 is the decrease in the total net position, which is primarily due to the effects of recognizing other post-employment benefits. Also, it should be noted that the lunch fund had a $193,000 loss, resulting in a fund balance deficit of $170,098 this year. This was a direct result of COVID-19 as we continued with operating expenses. We paid salaries and benefits, we provided meals, and we had a sharp decrease in revenue. On page 56 of the financial statements, page 56 indicates that the district carried forward an unassigned fund balance of 5.68% this year, which is 1.68% over the 4% New York State limit. The district, with board approval and discussion, decided to carry this excess fund balance forward in order to address some of the unbudgeted expenses that came along with the COVID-19 pandemic. The financial statements, pages 14 to 21, are a summary of the financial activities both during the fiscal year 1920 and as of year-end June 30th, 2020. The notes to the financial statements included on pages 22 to 50. They include in greater detail the types of accounting policies and procedures and restrictions that are all a part of the district's financial operations. The supplementary information is included on pages 51 through 58. It contains schedules reporting revenue and expenditure amounts compared to budget, the changes in the budget, and the capital project activity. The required reports under uniform guidance is included in pages 59 through 66. And this relates to the auditor's testing of grant funds, which are received from the federal government. Due to the amount of federal funds the district received, almost 1.9 million in the 1920 school year, the federal government requires the auditors to perform a test of transactions, a review of the internal controls, and to express an opinion related to our compliance with grant requirements. That's my summary of the district financial statements. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the extra classroom. And then I also do have Mr. Alan Walther has joined us this evening to make his comments and answer any questions. The extra classroom financial statements are the smaller report that you have. This represents the financial statements of the clubs and activity at the high school and middle school. The board has financial oversight of these funds. Karen Bauer served as the treasurer during the 2019-20 school year. The auditors issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which again is their highest level of assurance. This is a significant accomplishment for our extra classroom activity funds, and I would like to commend Ms. Bauer and the advisors on their hard work. And finally, missing from your packet is an internal control matters letter, and I'm happy to report that that's because there were no internal control matters to report this year. So at this time, I would like to ask Mr. Alan Walther, who's shareholder at the Bonadio Group, to join us and add his comments.
Yes, hi, good evening. Can you guys, I cannot see myself, but my camera's on and you can see and hear me? Okay, perfect. I jotted down some notes to report to you. I believe that Linda literally answered everything or mentioned everything that I had written down. The only thing that I'd like to add as well is we did complete the audit 100% remotely. We did not come on site, which we always do. You know, we've been your auditors for many, many years. We always come out. So that was a pretty heavy lift for Linda and the rest of the staff at the school district. So we'd like to thank them for their efforts in getting the audit done. You know, as Linda said, an unmodified opinion on your financial statements, no internal control findings, no federal findings. The only finding that we did have, which Linda did mention, was the excess fund balance finding with regard to the 4% rule with the state ed regulations. You know, just to put that into context, you guys have not had that finding in recent years. That's a pretty common finding for fiscal 2020 with our school districts. Because of the effects of COVID, the school districts received the vast majority of their revenue, but your expenses were less from the March 15th period to the June 30th period, resulting in a budgetary surplus for fiscal 2020. As the comments before, that surplus is getting gobbled up pretty quickly in fiscal 21 with the excess costs that you're having with COVID. There's still, you know, uncertainty with regard to state aid. So, you know, having a little bit extra fund balance this year is probably not such a bad thing. Other than that, I do not have anything else to add unless there's any questions. We did meet, as Linda said as well, we did meet with the audit committee and reviewed the financial statements and the reports in detail. Any questions?
No, I appreciate the time, Alan, and the time spent. It's always great to hear that opinion, that modified opinion, and I think the history of the district, in terms of its financial picture, is just a testament to previous official Linda's continued hard work and working with your team to find those areas that we need to improve on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Linda, I just want to welcome, I know Mary Ridzi started this week. The team is back to full complement, right?
That is correct, and I'm very happy about that.
I bet you are, and she's a wonderful accountant. So, welcome her to the district as our new treasurer.
And Mike, I think we have to vote in the financial statements.
Yes.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the and accept the 1920 audit report and financial statements. I need a motion to approve that. Michelle, second. Deanna, all those in favor? Aye. Yay. Very good. Those are accepted. So thank you very much, and continue hard work in our business office for looking out for the district. And I think that, one of the things that will come down the road, I think, Jeff, you mentioned to me not too long ago, is the state will be looking to come to the district soon, right? In terms of the state audit?
Yes, it's been a while since our New York State Comptroller sent us a letter indicating that he was going to have his staff come in, and we've received that letter. We don't have a timeline yet, do we, Linda?
We do not have a timeline yet. We received the letter mid-October. We expect to hear from them sometime in December. I believe they'll probably be coming over the winter months. So
Could make them come in remotely.
that would be nice.
Would be nice, right? Okay.
I'd be surprised they would be in. They probably will be remote.
Yeah, I just think that the board made a very wise choice in looking at that excess fund balance to make sure that we could cover our expenses. We know we're going into a difficult, challenging year as we prep for the budget pretty soon on the 21-22 year. And I think that we made the right decision on behalf of the school district and community to make sure that we are wise with our financial resources and plan for the future. So with that, we'll move into the academic update, and that'll be Mr. McHugh.
So with the academic update for 2020, there are things that we continue to monitor. We always monitor our student enrollment, our subgroups, our student with disability population percentages, our economically disadvantaged, our English language learners. We're constantly looking at attendance rates. We're looking at our homeless student rates. But with no June regions last spring, the data is really what we presented to the board at the end of last year. So we are looking at this data on a regular basis. And, one of the goals is to best ensure that our students that graduate from Columbia High School are college, career, and civic ready. What we do know is that student engagement matters and student attendance matters. So we want to provide opportunities for our students. We want to expose students to relevant curriculum, but we realize that student engagement and attendance are directly linked to student achievement. With the Regents data, just a couple of reminders, when you're looking at that, it could include the same student more than once. So a student in 9th grade, 10th grade, or 11th grade may fail a June Regents. They may take that Regents again in January. They may take it in August, and that is all part of the overall academic percentage. So when you're looking at percentage and you look at failures on New York State Regents, it could be the same student that may have taken that exam more than one time. The value of this data really is it starts with awareness, and I think as you review the slides and you've seen these numbers in the past, I think it's important to know what we're doing with the data. So we do compare our Regents data. We compare it with our regional schools within Questar. We compare it with school districts within our RIC, our Regional Information Center, and then we compare it to suburban council schools. So when you look at a percentage and you see your passing rate is 94% and your mastery rate, and you're looking at those percentages, to kind of put those percentages in context, we do a lot of comparisons. So we compare within suburban schools and just see where those numbers really fall. So what we do realize is that our passing rate is very strong in all of our Regents exams, but mastery rate drops a little bit. So you take any courses where if you look at our geometry Regents, we look at New York State averages, 98% passing rate for Columbia High School. The last time we took the geometry Regents, it was the highest in the suburban councils. So was Algebra 2. But then when you start to look at our mastery rate drops us to 5th in the suburban council. So our passing rate is high, but it gives us a new goal and a new focus to really look at those students and bring them from passing to mastery rate. Again, you can go through global history, U.S. history. You've seen these numbers in the past. One of the things that our department chairs have done is we give them itemized skill reports for multiple years. So they're looking at skill reports and standards reports on how well our students performed on New York State regions. And we look for those common skills or those common standards that over a sequence of years, our students have struggled with a little bit. So, it may be questions that target a particular learning standard, and over the last 3 years, the percentage of students that answered those questions correctly may be a little concerning. And then we look at where we really address those topics within our curriculum. So our department chairs facilitate a lot of meetings with their colleagues using those reports. We also look at some of our higher level courses and that's kind of a philosophical balance. So a lot of times there are some prerequisites that our students need to have in order to take a higher level course. And there's a balance between really wanting our students to be able to challenge themselves and take these higher level classes with a balance of, looking at our prerequisites and do our students have the right background, prior experience in order to be successful in that class. So always a fine line. We look at our graduation rate, which has continued to go up each year, and we look at our 3 through 8 testing. One of the things that you will notice is that over the last few years, the math scores have gone up. I think that's directly tied to the fact that we've been curriculum mapping and the fact that we have a consistent primary instructional resource with the Envision Mathematics. So we use that K through 8 now. In prior years, we've used Envision Math, the old version of that. And K5, grade 6 had no primary instructional resource, and then 7 and 8 used a completely different resource. So I just think tightening things up a little bit with greater consistency has been a productive step. In regards to chronic absenteeism, we monitor this all the time. We're constantly pulling reports from our data processing team, and we're looking at our absentee rates, and we're constantly calling students and calling families and trying to get them in. And that's been helpful to be more proactive and not wait until a student is chronically absent, but making those connections before a student has missed too many days. In regards to course failures, you have our most updated data. The last year we looked at our quarter one, typically the course failures are higher than any other quarter. Quite often you look at your transitional years and you look at our 9th graders where there are typically more course failures that year. And that's basically students getting acclimated to a new set of expectations. But for example, in 2019 and 2020 at Columbia High School, 46, we look at our students, 97 students in grades 9 through 12 failed more than one class. Out of those 97 students, we recognize the fact that a majority of those students are also listed as economically disadvantaged, and they're also listed as chronically absent. So we know that when students aren't in class, that they perform a little lower than we would like. We are aware, the report cards just came out last week, but we do have our quarter one course failures for the first quarter at both Goff and Columbia High School, and we are working through that, and I will be prepared to present that information to the board at our next meeting. Any questions? Yes.
What's the passing rate and what's the mastery rate?
So the passing rate is typically 65 unless it's a student with a disability, and then it's a 55. And then the mastery rate, I believe, is 85%, I believe, is the mastery rate. But also important is that the scoring is a really complex process. So it is based on the number of correct answers, the level of question difficulty, and the skills each question measures. You know, grades are earned and they're on scale score. So raw scores are converted to the equivalent of a scale score, and it gets a little complicated, but I'll give you an example. In algebra, the last time the Regents was given, 65% is passing, which comes out to approximately 27 credits out of a possible 86 credits. So they have it, all the statisticians have a formula, and there's going to be a certain percentage of students that pass. There's going to be a certain percentage of students that hit that mastery rate, and that's kind of a moving target for our teachers a little bit. So New York State Board of Regents, they want the Regents to have the same level of difficulty each year, and they have to review it question by question and see how many questions answered each question correctly, how many answered it incorrectly, and that's why it's always a moving target. We never know what the magic number of questions that need to be answered correctly in order to hit that mastery level or passing. Thank you.
Any other questions for Jim?
Mike, I have one comment.
Yep.
Jim, this is John Dunn. When we talk about the chronic absenteeism as it relates to the economically disadvantaged, and we know what that population is as it relates to the failure rates, is it possible, or has it already been looked at, is this the same, how is this group doing during COVID? It's challenging enough to get them to participate and perform during normal times. And are you capable of cross-referencing that list just to see what the performance level is, or if it's even worse? And is this group part of the group that we have trouble even tracking?
So, you know, what I know and what the data supports is that in-person instructional time is vital. And we've been advocating that there's equity K-12, that all of our students deserve that opportunity to have that in-person learning. And we look at our course failures and we realize that we have over 1,300 students at Columbia High School. And we realize that 66 students account for almost 50% of our course failures. So then we start to look to see who are those 66 students. And a lot of those students are students that have been also listed as economically disadvantaged. They're also chronically absent. They're not coming to school. So, you know, we have an attendance team. Our building administrators and our teachers have held Google Meets, constant phone calls, keeping phone logs, modified and adjusted schedules to try to help better accommodate our families. We've made phone calls to CPS, and currently CPS really doesn't even want to take those phone calls. We used to be able to go along the route saying that it was educational neglect, but CPS has not been a tremendous amount of support to our districts. But we have an attendance team that goes out and make home visits. Some people at the houses answer the door and others don't. But we stay at it. We've encouraged some students that chose to be full remote to come back to hybrid because it just wasn't working for them. Our school counselors and school social workers are addressing social emotional wellness issues, providing counseling, providing counseling and making connections to the parents. We're utilizing our child study teams to come out with targeted interventions for these students. But the reality of it is, honestly, we know that we have 12 students at Columbia High School that haven't engaged yet. They haven't attended school for an in-person day. They haven't logged on during remote days or live virtual days. And we continue to use our school resource officer, and we're sending our counselors out to knock on doors and make home visits. And we're on it on a regular basis. So we are aware of who those students are.
Okay, thank you. Just something to think about, not that we don't have enough to think about, but at some point in time, we're going to get back to normal. And I think when we do, that population is going to need some type of really specialized programming to try to negate some of the effects of this pandemic on their lives. So thank you for the update.
The other one thing I'd like to add in regards to academic data is that we've implemented the universal screeners in K through 5. And that started 2 years ago, and where we established cut points to provide academic intervention services, it's usually about 20% of our students that are eligible for that targeted intervention, that additional boost of English language arts. And if we use those same cut points that we've used the previous 2 years, it actually captures about 70% of our K-5 students, which isn't even a manageable number. So, you know, when you talked about board goals, we are already on those things, and we're looking at loss of learning during COVID-19. And, you know, it is there, and it's something that we're struggling with all the time and trying to figure out how to best support those students and families.
Thanks, Jim. I mean, we appreciate the efforts to reach out to all the students, and we know how challenging that is. And I know that we as a district, we chose to keep our AIS teachers available, right, Jeff?
Yeah, we are providing AIS in the same form, whether that be push-in or direct services in the same form that we have provided in the past. We're using the same assessments and screeners, and we really think that's important.
Yeah.
Particularly because of the learning loss that you've talked about, Mike and Jim just mentioned. We have higher numbers of kids who qualify for AIS than typically would, as described by Jim. It's a serious issue.
Yeah.
And I think we're a little ahead of the curve in the fact that we at least have the diagnostic data to know who those kids are. And, you know, we're in the process right now of talking about what might we be able to do within our current resources to address those issues, you know, as we move into the second and third quarters. You know, we've talked about such things as, you know, we can't bring in the kids every day, but could we have some extension of extended day learning opportunities for kids where staff would provide additional instruction to what we can offer now. We also want to, you know, we also have those same academic intervention services issues at the middle school. You know, in the sixth grade, as the kids are transitioning from fifth to sixth grade.
Yeah.
The sixth graders, there's some real needs in sixth grade.
Yeah, I think that John, you said it very well, that this is a problem that's going to impact us, an issue, I should say, going to impact us for years to come. And we have to be prepared to address those and start those planning and be able to invest in those programs like we have in the past at the high school, middle school, but they may increase, unfortunately, to get our students back on track.
I think, Mike, and these are all really good points. And I guess my main point in keeping the conversation alive about reaching this population is because we have the data. We're collecting all kinds of data right now, and I think the data analysis will better prepare us to deal with these issues as they come along in a much more expeditious fashion, rather than trying to formulate something down the road. As we are looking at the data, you know, we have our immediate gains, the things that we're trying to keep on target, and then our long-term projections. You know, where can we go from there as things start to get back on track? So again, thank you for everybody and their hard work.
Yep. Thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll move on the agenda. Table motions. I don't have anything at this time. And old business, board members, I don't have anything at this point. No. Okay. Moving on, the next section is our consent agenda, items A through H. Any questions, comments on those items? No. Just want to mention gifts. We have more donations of hand sanitizer from the county. Always appreciate it. If there's no comments or questions, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Michelle, I need a second. Jennifer, all those in favor? Yes?
Yep.
Very good, approved. Moving on to our new business. Any new business, board members?
Nope.
Okay. Public forum number 2. Is there anything, Linda, that came in since during the meeting?
Yes, we do have a few questions and comments.
Questions and comments, okay. And make sure that they identify themselves in the email.
Yes, they have. Yes, they have. The first is a question on 2 different topics, and this is from Alyssa Blaustein. She would first like to know why was the students cohort not disclosed in today's COVID positive student announcement? And
Follow up to that. Is there another question to that?
it's on a different
Totally
topic.
different.
It's on a different topic.
We didn't share the cohort. I assume what you mean by that is that the student was an A-day student or a B-day student. Because when we were notified by the county, they requested that we begin to look at the classroom level, the schedule for the students that were in that classroom, each period of instruction, the staff members assigned, the students that are sitting at lunch with that student. They use a criteria of students that are in the immediate area of the classroom sitting near the student, the students they use a 12-feet criteria in the cafeteria. They look at the mode of instruction. If there was a lot of talking in a classroom or more interaction in the classroom, they want us to describe that type of instruction. So those were the categories of information that were required of contact tracing. Whether the student was an A-day student or a B-day student was really not material to whether or not. It's really more granular than that. Where was this student? What classes did the student attend? Where did the student sit at lunch? And it's really more specific than that. So we didn't disclose the day that the student was in person. I can tell you that the last day that the student was in attendance, based on our records, was November 12th, which was a Thursday.
Okay, thank you. And
Which was an A-day.
Thank
And
you.
we just didn't think to disclose it because it was more granular what they were looking for, and it was more specific.
Thank you. Her second questioner is why are online math and science classes never allowed to be added to a CHS student transcript? For example, a student taking the same pre-calc class at Hudson Valley online due to the pandemic that Columbia students taking honors pre-calc get college credit for is unable to have that class added to their CHS transcript. Ironically, the student taking the class at Hudson Valley will complete the course at twice the pace because it will be completed in 1 semester versus 1 year at the high school. It should be noted that the student is not taking the class at CHS due to a schedule conflict.
I know that Mr. McHugh and I have discussed this issue in the past. I'm going to ask that Mr. McHugh respond in writing to that individual because it's a really complicated answer, and it's something that we have talked about in the past. But Mr. McHugh will respond to that individual if we just forward the name and the contact information to Mr. McHugh.
I will do that. The next question is again from Alyssa Blaustein. She didn't see the driver's ed program for students whose program was interrupted in the spring on tonight's agenda. She's wondering if she missed it.
It's something that we're currently discussing with the Teachers Association and the board. We will be discussing it, and we're trying to come up with a program that would enable the students who were not able to complete the program in the spring to complete it, and we're entertaining the possibility of a new course for a new group of students. And it's under discussion right now. It was not ready for board public review and or approval at this point, but we are discussing it.
Thank you. The next question is from Amanda Van Buren. She is the parent of a first grader, second grader, and fifth grader. And she wonders, has there been a decision on virtual Wednesdays and if they plan on doing away with it?
We've discussed it. We decided that initially we would focus on in-person learning for kindergarten. We still believe that given where we're at with the COVID situation, that we may be in a situation where virtual Wednesday might be 5 days a week. And we want to make sure that our staff and our students are prepared for that type of instruction. It is still under discussion. It is still under review. Given the rising cases, it's becoming more apparent to us that we may need to maintain that in order to make sure that the kids can make the shift in the event that we have to go to remote learning for an extended period of time. But it's still under discussion.
Thank you. The last comment is from Lori Marcioni. She is the parent of a fifth grader, eighth grader, and 10th grader. And she has asked me to read this email. Dear board members, I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate the monumental effort that has been made to bring back our younger students for more in-person learning. You have gone above and beyond what any person could expect. Please know that there are many community members who support the continued implementation of the hybrid model for all students at all grade levels. The AB plan keeps our kids safe, and I believe will allow us to stay open longer than other districts that have different plans. Our teachers are doing an amazing job providing our students with engaging learning both in and out of the classroom. While I appreciate that Kay has special needs, how will you justify to parents of, say, first graders why kindergarten is taking priority? By bringing one group of students in full-time, the separation of cohorts for contact tracing is eliminated. For example, a fifth grade B-day student with a kindergarten sibling will now be exposed through the kindergartner to both days. Has the district talked about how this mixing of the cohorts will affect the contact tracing? How will the change to the number of students on buses be handled with the increase in students attending on both days? Should the district decide to move forward with bringing kindergarten back full-time, I hope the start date would be put off until after all holidays are over, not just Thanksgiving. We have seen what one social gathering at Halloween did to spread the virus in our community. I can only imagine the uptick we will see after Thanksgiving and all of the December holidays. I am concerned that the efforts to increase in-person learning for one group will, in the long run, disrupt the district's ability to provide in-person learning for all students. Thank you for your continued efforts on behalf of our students.
I thank Mrs. Marcioni for her comments on the hybrid program and her continued support for the district's teachers. We had a discussion within our administrative team and with our kindergarten teachers about all of those considerations, including the mixing of cohorts concern, as well as the concerns related to the fact that we were able to do it for kindergarten, but for not the other grades. We decided that we felt that the benefits academically and socially for our kindergartners were, because we could do it, and that it was feasible, and we could maintain the social distancing in kindergarten, that we should do something for our youngest children. It was something that we heard about at the beginning of the year as our kindergarten parents, new children to the district, were adjusting, and we thought that that consideration outweighed some of the other concerns. We also believe that in many cases, the kids are in mixed cohorts outside of school. And we have not found that to be as much of an issue, for example, if they're engaged in, recreational activities or sports activities. The mixing of cohorts has seemed to be less of a factor as we've implemented the reopening plan. The contact tracing enables us to know who's in what class and where they're at, and so that won't be affected by the schedule. And our busing capacity is sufficient to provide the kids with the busing without compromising the social distancing on the bus. So it's not a perfect solution to a complicated problem. We thought that where we could make some inroads for in-person learning, we should. And we did weigh and discuss all of those factors, and we landed on the fact that we should try to do something to provide more in-person instruction for our youngest kids.
Thank you. There are no other public comments at this time.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate the comments from the public, as always. And we'll be getting back to the one committee member with their question. We'll go to the board forum. I'll just kind of go around the screen here. And John, anything? Good. Michelle? Good. Frank? Good. Joanne? Good. Thumbs up. Deanna? Good. Jennifer? And our in-person folks, Mark or Kathleen?
Good.
Oh, good. Did I get everybody? I didn't miss anybody, right? Okay. All right.
Yeah, no, I'm good, thanks.
All right. Thanks. I think it was a excellent meeting. A lot of good information shared this evening. We have some work to do on our goals and objectives. So with that, that concludes our public portion of our meeting. We do have need for an executive session for purposes of collective bargaining, personnel matters, and superintendent evaluation. So we don't anticipate any business after the meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Simons?
No, we don't anticipate coming out of executive session and back into public session. Mr. Goodwin has requested 10 minutes to send the new link to our board members. So we'll take a 10-minute intermission to get set for the executive session.
So I need a motion to move into executive session. Let's see, Jennifer, second. John, all those in favor? Yay. Excellent. So have a great night, everybody. Thank you.